Live from Loveland, Colorado, and bringing you today a Truck 5200 Classic OCLV back in the 90s. I remember when these were new, so it's kind of going to be a fun little teardown and going back through time to get back to the old roots of what carbon used to be like back then, and they're still pretty decent bikes today being refurbished, but without further ado, let's dive into this. So yeah, I sold this gentleman a nicer, newer road bike, and he had this older one that he sold me, so I had to refurbish and give it new life. So a couple things to point out is kind of felt under the gun buying this in the sense that he bought a bike for me, and I mean, I would have bought it, but he was asking a little more than I would want to spend. But it does have Ultegra componentry throughout. The frame did seem intact, and it does have the Rolf comp wheels, which does have a following to it for sure. So it does have some tidbits that are kind of cool. The negatives is really just the retrofitting for the more modern componentry that's available today. Like not a 1-inch headset steer tube, 1.1 is more standard. This has what they call a quill stem, which goes inside instead of the A headset. And also the bars are pretty narrow versus the 31.8. This is 21.6. So yeah, that's a lot of numbers to throw at you. When you look at something like this with my eye, it's like, okay, these things are probably going to have to be swapped out and changed to make it more modernized. Not just for that, but really the basic bottom line is fit. Because you only, I mean, you'd really have to scour to get different stem lengths. And we did sell several different types of stem lengths back in the day. And you know, the 1-inch is pretty much outdated, even though you can still get 1-inch headsets, which is great as a replacement, and you don't really need anything too fancy, but there are still some like Chris Kings out there floating around, which are kind of the high end. But the thing is with these stems, there's really no kind of easy adjustment to it because they don't have a front load bolt system. Basically, you'd have to strip the whole right side, one side of the bar to be able to swap out that stem. So for fitting, it didn't really make it so great. So anywho, we're gonna dive into this and take a look. So I grabbed some parts already, and since it is, you know, more of the customer base that I have is more recreational riders just getting into road riding, I decided to go with more of a bar that's a 31.8 clamp with a kind of a lift to it, the Rover bar from Specialized. So I had one of these laying around. Also, I'm going to swap it out to a 31.8 style stem with more of a lift. Whoever buys this bike can adjust it and have a little more accessibility for different stems available as the aftermarket. And to convert these, they make these fancy little adapters. And what this adapter does is it takes that quill portion and it gives you a clamp surface for that A headset. So basically you'll see these on a lot of bikes already out there that have been converted for that fit reason specifically. So those are the things we're going to be diving into, switching those out once I put it reassembled. But I'm just really going to go over what I need to look for and kind of strip it down and inspect and kind of go through the history of the OCLV. Autumn Compact Low Void was their phrase back in the 90s, and they carried it into the 2000s, and you'll see the OCLV. Some people think the O is a D, so you'll see that in descriptions of some people's reselling posts on Facebook or Craigslist, which is kind of funny to me, but anywho, it's really, I mean, I don't blame them. But the model is a 5200, and I believe this is a 56, but these guys are kind of nice because they'll have a stamp size in the dropout as well as the serial number. They'll have a sticker underneath for a serial number, but for somehow that's compromised. You still have a etched into the metal dropout where the dropout's bonded to the actual frame. So without further ado, let's dive into this guy. Rolf wheels. Let's talk about Rolf wheels. Rolf was acquired in the 90s from Trek. Like a lot of other companies, we're talking about Trek purchasing Lamond, Gary Klein, Gary Fisher, Rolf Wheels, and what was it, Bontrager, obviously Bontrager with all the parts and so forth. He actually made, I mean, if you just got into cycling, you're like, Bontrager, what's this all about? It's like, well, Bontrager, Keith Bontrager, he started 80s, 90s welding steel frames in Santa Cruz, California, so, or San Jose, one of those two. I think it was Santa Cruz. And he made a little plant down there, like they made custom frames for steel because he was hating steel frames falling apart, and steel was actually the main property metal being used in that time, and they just started using aluminum. But he made one excellent steel frame. Well, Trek acquired him, and they carried the Bontrager bike line for, I'd say, about 3 years. As you can see, I have a Bontrager, Santa Cruz, yeah, Bontrager banner behind me. We got that because we were a Trek dealer, and when they had these acquisitions, we picked up Klein and Bontrager had some pretty sweet mountain bikes for steel enthusiasts, that kind of thing. And this is mid-90s. And then you had Klein, which did mountain bikes as well as road, which had some nice high-end. And Trek decided to slide in Gary Fisher and Lamont in our competition down the street. They were a specialized dealer. So, you know, back in the day. But anyway, Rolf was acquired, and he had this paired spoke system, which is kind of a really cool thing. They had some kind of deal saying, oh, it cuts down oscillations and all those kinds of stuff, and on trainers or whatever. I don't know how much that was really true. I never really saw any statistics or studies or anything like that, but you know, it was definitely a marketable thing. And Bontrager, with the Rolf stopped making wheels for Trek, Bontrager still kept the paired spoke system. I would have to look into see if it was like a copyright thing, but they were able to keep it. Rolf did, I think they still make wheels today with more of a paired spoke system now, but it's kind of like one of those things that kind of full circle, like Rolf got really popular paired spoke. Shimano jumped on the bandwagon and made wheels, and they had paired spoke systems too, along with all these other companies. And all of a sudden, like, oh wait, we got this new wheel. It's like less spokes, but it's more even. So that's one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, well, we're back to non-paired spoke systems. When they built these guys up, they're based off of a higher tension, so you had a little bit thicker spokes, but you're able to take out some spokes, so it's less spokes. Kind of give you the perception of lighter weight. They actually worked really well, and the Rolfs worked really well too. I have nothing against them. They also did it in the mountain bikes, which were kind of cool looking. But if you really know back your old stuff, back in the 90s, they had Spinergy wheels, which is that 4-bladed carbon wheel. I mean, they weren't all that light, but they were kind of cool looking, definitely. But anywho, this is what the Trek coolness factor. And you got the red, white, and blue. I think this was produced right at the time that Trek was sponsoring Lance Armstrong on the postal team. They just haven't had the postal, I mean, they have the postal coloring, but not the postal decals on these yet. So that's what we got. The front wheel looks good. This guy that owned it was the original owner, and he rode the living daylights out of it. But I think it's still gonna clean up super sweet for somebody just to get into road riding. I believe these were, well, these are stainless. I thought they were titanium for a bit. I know they made a titanium version of it. So on any kind of paired spoked wheel, what you want to look at is the drive side spokes going into the rim. And you want to make sure that we didn't really have any problems per se with the Rolf wheels. But when they went over to the Bontrager labeling, they really got aggressive of taking material away. And that's where we started getting some cracking in the rim. and failures as well, but don't recall having any issues with the Rolf ones. So I did remember looking at this pretty closely when the gentleman dropped it off to seek out those potential problems, but looks like we're good. Well, the spokes all look pretty straight, like they're not been mangled or anything, so I'm sure these will clean up really well. I was looking at one spot, but apparently it cleaned up, so we're good to go. Also, need to check this chain. The cassette might be okay, but it's quite dirty. Excuse me for a second out of the screen. I have to use, how to use this? Use a chain whip to hold the cassette in place, and you use the lock ring tool to loosen it up. And sometimes you have to get some leverage on there. This wasn't all that tight. You want those to be tight. You want to be like, have to really muscle them to get them off. And when you put them on there until you hear that ratchet. So this 9-speed cassette has a couple sets that are bound together, then the rest of these are individual. These will all clean up in a sonic cleaner quite nicely. I do pre-treat them with a little bit of a degreaser to get that going. I thought I checked the chain. Oh yeah, the chain was really tight. So I think if he told me correctly, I think he got this all tuned up and ready to go. And this is one of those individuals, I think he has like 2-3 bikes, and basically had a really once over before he got the new one, and which is good for me, so that's less parts that I need to replace. The tires though, these are interesting tires. They're the all conditions from Specialized, and this is the Armadillo series. So back when the Armadillos started coming out, I remember a guy came in and he said he rode across country, coast to coast, on only one set of Armadillo tires, which kind of blew my mind because Armadillo is designed to have a flat prevention in there. And these look pretty worn, so I'll definitely switch them out to nicer tires, or newer tires anyway. But it's like one of those things like, wow, they actually can make a tire that holds up. Granted, the guy probably had sealant tubes and liners and everything else in there, but who knows, one of those things. But that was kind of interesting. Somebody actually, one pair of tires back in the 90s, or early 2000s, rode across the country with one set of tires. So you'd think you'd wear out through those a little bit faster. All right, so we're going to take some cables off here so I can get to the frame where I can actually get some better look at everything. And so I'm going to talk about this frame a little bit and what's really kind of unique. And carbon fiber kind of hit the scene, obviously, in the 90s. And Trek, I remember when these were released, they were new. It was kind of just nuts. Because back then, it was just aluminum. And they also had aluminum bonded steel, or aluminum bonded carbon. Let me grab one. I have one, actually. Sorry to pull out a screen, but I should have brought this out. This is the classic 5200. This guy was the top of the line prior to the 5200s coming out. And what you see here is carbon lugged bonded aluminum. And this is the 7 tube. So you got the 3 main tubes and you got the 4 change stay and seat stays. So this was the top line. This has full DA, the original Dura-Ace on it. I got this, just a classic pickup. Rode it a few times. Pretty cool. Actually fit me really well, which was very ironic. And just puts me back in the day when my parents had the bike shop, Parker Bikes. And that was one of those like wowness factors. When you sold one of those, it was always a special order because back then those were pretty pricey. And, but not compared to today's standards. Think about it. That retailed for what new one's starting range is today. But hey, anyway, I mean, for back then, to really talk somebody into spending $2,500 on a bike was pretty good challenge, because that's what it was. But they took those concepts of bonding, instead of having aluminum lugs, they made carbon lugs. So when you look at this OCLV carbon, it's a lugged system. Just like that, you just can't see it. And they carried that lug system for, I would say, 8 to almost 10 years. I mean, it was quite a big long time where they used this lug OCLV, and they also integrated it into the spine bikes from Le Mans, where they had the top part OCLV lugged. Then you had a steel bottom, which was kind of cool too in its own fashion. So, you know, this is one of those early entry ones, and it's just kind of cool to think that I remember the Trek rep coming in, and it looked like a heart made out of carbon, and he had tubes that just like, this is how they go together, and they glue them and bake them and whatever. And what's also an interesting tidbit too is if you damage this, they were able to debond the tubing and put a new one in and reglue it and paint it as an option at Trek in Waterloo, Wisconsin, which is kind of cool, or replace dropouts. And this is before they had the derailleur hanger, replacement derailleur hangers, which is a savior for a lot of bikes from there on out, because that was an issue. Because if you ever, especially mountain biking, if you ding this up, bent his toast. I've had a couple toasts. And I mentioned before in another video where the old Schwinn wrap, when Schwinn was owned by Schwinn, to destroy the bike, they would just bend this derailleur hanger off until it snapped or to an angle, and that's your toast frame. And we'd be like, okay, we'll make it a single speed, whatever. But we weren't supposed to. We were supposed to just throw it away. But anywho, that's a little bit on the OCLV. They also made, OCLV was pretty much all made in the United States. They didn't carry those overseas. So it was a process that they were pretty proud of. And looking at the rear derailleur here, the jockey pulleys seem to be okay, but you can kind of see it start shark teething a little bit. So I think I might find another pair of jockey pulleys to put on this to make it shift a little bit smoother and track a little bit better. So take that off there. And this is what they call a braze-on derailleur. A braze-on mounts to the actual frame or to a clamp that goes around the tubing. And this, they have a plate that screws in, and this is a braze-on. So if you're looking for replacement parts for a bike that you have, and it says braze-on, it still might be usable as long as you got the right band clamp to be able to put on that bike. And a lot of the derailleurs will have the clamp integrated, built into it, or there's like 3 different sizes of these that the braze-on goes to. And then you can actually mount a new derailleur on there if you need to do some part swapping, that kind of thing. So this is a triple, and what makes it a triple is a double. Oh, here's a braze-on one that's already on a band clamp. A double will just look smooth like this for a double chain ring. The triple will have actual extra ramping to help that chain go up from that small chain ring up to the bigger rings, that kind of thing. So that's gonna be clean. Don't lose track of that. All right, proceeding on taking it apart still. And this Ultegra stuff is after Shimano came up with 600, and 600 was the predecessor of the Ultegra. And Ultegra is still out today, as you probably know. It's the second step down from the top of the line, as well as the 600. The Dura-Ace has been around for a long time. So looking at that bike there, the old 2500, yeah, that has the old Dura-Ace. And it was pretty cool. That one was really cool because that was the first year that they actually went to STI shifting for the brake levers. So that was the year before that one. It was down tube shifters. So that was a game changer when you're looking at the racing and so forth, and some have to reach down each time to change your gears. It was an advantage to be able to just click, and they have a split second less, less notice of you ready to drop a couple gears and go and sprint. So by the way, get ready for it. Tour de France is right around the corner. That's our July big Super Bowl race of cycling. Let us know who you're rooting for. I really haven't followed up too closely lately of who's all in it, but it should be a fun one. And it's like the second year out of the weirdness of COVID, so might actually be back to somewhat normal feeling, kind of watching, which is nice. And it's always kind of cool to me to watch. I have a TV up I specifically bought a TV in my shop just to have that on in July, just to have it on background noise, and I'll watch the stages on repeat, and just kind of get some insight of what they're doing and what's new and all the tech that's coming out, because that's where a lot of the Shimano and SRAM and Campanoli over the years have shown and released their new stuff. Is there, you see on the race circuit first, sometimes before you even see it at the show, even though at the show they would have concept bikes and so forth. But that's actually the test of a lot of the componentry before they actually put it in production. There is a slight drawback to that, yeah, you can get some good insights on parts in the race circuit and how they perform, but as in longevity and also different manufacturers. So if, for example, Specialized is using a specific one frame from Trek for a race, and that's whether it's on, or a couple different, one Trek from Space is for racing and one from Specialized and one from another, or whatever, and they go to production, the other bike frames that the manufacturer have might be spec'd out a little bit different, as in geometry sizing. And you got to think about it too, that those parts that are being used on a daily basis, kind of interesting, because they're worked on by a mechanic every day. So of course they're going to perform at this highest level. Yeah, they'll get reported on some stuff that's wonky, but it's kind of, I don't know, it goes tongue in cheek both directions. So therefore, my suggestion to those consumers out there are looking, I want the Dura-Ace stuff, or whether the next top of line stuff is coming out, I'd wait a year, just 1 year. Once they do the first release, I'd wait 1 year. Reason being, well, first it's really expensive. It's not going to come down in price, but at least they would, by the second year it goes production, gets thrown into the market, they'll find some bugs they'll have to address and take care of, and they'll actually quietly fix those sometimes. So time 2 years or 3 years, that's where you get the best solid bug debugged componentry out there. So that's what I would suggest, or just wait till that technology trickles down to the next level, like Ultegra. When Di2 came out, the electronic shifting, I wasn't even going close to touch that stuff until it came to Ultegra, because it's just one of those things that you want to make sure all the bugs are worked out, and the price on the bikes nowadays are so expensive for new that it's better to check. And also, if you're buying in the used market, I found a lot more success with Ultegra because those bugs have been worked out. And like on Dura-Ace, you don't know if this is the first gen where they had issues. It may not have been addressed. So this has self-extracting bolts on it. Woo, that is tight. Oh man, that may not want to. So the cassette was overly tight. Ah, boy. I have to work on that later. Soak it. Let's see if I can get the other side to at least break free. That one broke free. That one's missing this extraction bolt, so I'll have to find one of those. It's the wash that goes on top. I have a video on that. Leverage, leverage, leverage. Okay. Come on. Yeah, I'm gonna have to wait on that, soak it. Anywho, to soak this stuff, you can use like PB Blaster, that kind of works. It's really stinky, so I suggest doing it outside, because it will really fumigate your garage or your workspace. And if you're sharing that workspace with somebody, they're gonna hate you. So I would definitely do that outside. And to get in there, I can take this adjuster cap off and then squirt some in there. Oh, that might be on there pretty tight too. So I will let all that all soak. I'm not into forcing anything at this point. Also, another thing I like to do is take these little guys off the cable stops on the down tube and clean them out. Because I like to get these smooth and in running shape prior to stringing up cables. That way, if you're out there on a ride, you can actually reach down and do a minor adjustment. If your cables have kind of gone out of wonky or what have you, if they're seized up with grit, kind of is a bummer. And for the rear, you can readjust the derailleur housing on this, the derailleur adjustment, but for the front, you're kind of stuck with this guy. And you do always need to do a little bit of adjustment to fine tune that. So I'm just going to clean and inspect this frame, make sure I didn't walk into a nightmare. I'm not too worried about that crank. I'll be able to get that off. I just want to probably soak it a little bit. And also, when you clean off the frame, you want to look at underneath parts. I call the scary unders, because that's where you know the contaminants go. Car racks will chunk up the top tube here sometimes, or if they had too big of a tire, it'll rub up against the inside of the frame and cut through it. If the carbon's too thin, or even aluminum, I've seen it cut through aluminum too. So just double checking. Also looking for that serial number. It doesn't have a sticker, but I know I have the stamp. And model numbers on this side and the serial number, and this is a 56 centimeter. So this actually looks pretty good. Once I got a lot of scratches to buff out and clean up. It's not going to be perfect or in mint condition, but it's going to still make a wonderful red, white, and blue bike for somebody to just start into road riding. Yeah, absolutely. What was I going to talk about? Yeah, so I'll be switching all of this part out, and I'll pop this off. Where did I put that other one? That's the wrong one. There it is. This is called a quill. It uses a wedge system. So being a quill, you know, as the fork is a steel steer tube with an alloy, sometimes alloy crown, and the carbon of the blade doesn't start until about here down, then it's bonded down there. Same technology is used today. So if the stem doesn't release, you back that bolt off a little bit, and this seems barbaric, but you tap that down, that releases that wedge, which is that wedge there, which I'm going to be replacing it with this guy. Oh, the cap won't come off, but it has the same thing underneath here. That replaces it, so I can use the A headset system on that guy. So I will just be stripping these down and putting these shifters in the sonic cleaner and cleaning up and get them all back to life. So, and that seems kind of dry. So I will definitely pop this apart, and by doing so, it's not the compression version of the A headsets. So you got to go find some old tools like these. 32 was the Millimeter was the common one for this one here. Older school, it went down to, or the 30. That guy, and 36 was the mountain bike ones for the 1.8". So 30s were the 1-inch headset. And what you do, just like on your hubs, you have to hold the lock cup or the cone in position. Then you got to unscrew the lock nut, which is on the top. I'll pop this open live and see how ugly it is. You got your spacers, and you want to make sure you don't lose track of those guys. And this is where they're interesting. The spacer itself is keyed, has a little notch, because there's a notch on the actual threads of the fork. Let's see if these ball bearings fall out. You want to take a bet? The bloop, just fall right out, or are they caged? Or are they just glued in there from the old grease? Oh boy. Well, I'm missing one ball bearing. Oh boy. There's the other lock ring. I do have some backup headsets that I acquired from a gentleman that took bikes apart. And I believe I have a 1-inch. So these bearings on the newer ones are a cartridge. So these are what they call loose bearings, but it's also on a container. So they're not technically loose. A container design, well, is the ease of taking it off and on to clean, but it also reduces one ball bearing. So you have one less ball bearing than you need to do in there. So you could technically repack this with one extra bearing and it actually would be just fine. And then we look at this crown here. And just like hubs, you want to see if they're pitted on that race. So if it's pitted, then you need to remove the race and probably remove the whole headset. Pound these cups out. Well, there's the ball bearing. You can kind of see the cage is a little twisted. That's not great. So I'll see if I can either find a new cage or, I think I'm gonna have to put a new headset on this guy. Yeah, because where the ball bearings are riding, it's supposed to be smooth and like a smooth line. It's fine as a smooth line, but this has what they call, it's pitted. So yeah. Yeah, this is gonna be interesting. Okay, so with these particular frames, they actually bonded a steel sheath in there. That's where the cups fit into. And I can feel the gap where the carbon is here. So the steel sheath inside is here and also here. And then I'll have to press those out and put in a new headset on that. So, and also note, your crank shouldn't spin this smoothly. It's supposed to be grease in there. That bottom bracket's toast, but that's a cartridge system, so I just have to smash a new cartridge in there, which you can still get. Yeah, it's not supposed to do that. Anyway, that's what we got going. We have definitely some parts that we need to be fixing up on this guy to get its best condition possible for the new owner. The headset, yeah, that makes sense. So there's a part tool that goes over on top that cuts into this crown race, so you can actually pull that off. Then you have a crown race set, which is another tool to put on there. So to replace a headset, okay, if you use the Park tools, which is like the snap-on of tools for bikes, just the tools alone, you're looking easily $300 to $400 just to replace this old school, pull out the cups, the race, and putting a press and putting the headset crown back on there, maybe more, $500 worth of tools. You can find an inexpensive version of those that are made overseas. They're very, very similar. If you're just doing one or two of those things and just want to have as a backup, that's a good tool to get. Because, you know, those park ones are nice. If you have the funds, it's great, but they're pretty pricey, especially if you're only going to do it once or twice. So, unless you're going to open up a whole bike shop yourself and fix everybody's bike in your neighborhood like I am. Anywho, that is that. So I'm going to basically finish this guy up and detail it later, but right now I have to get ready for the MS 150, which is a charity ride that I do mechanical support on. I have been doing it for myself. I've been doing it for from 2006 to now, whatever the math is, 17 years. Hard to believe I can do that and only missed like 1 or 2 years in there. My parents, they own Parker Bikes. They started doing the MS ride support in 89 or 88 or 89. I think it was 89 when I first worked there. And my dad was a big part of the MS 150 as organizing the bike shops and so forth. Even when the bike shop closed in 2001, we had to close Parker Bikes. He still was the bike shop coordinator until 2005, until he passed away. So I picked up the reins the year after that, and I've been doing it ever since, and the buddies of mine. So I will be out there. I'm going to try to shoot live out there on Saturday because it's in Loveland, so I should have a good cell connection to be able to do a live segment of it and just show the craziness and what we're doing there. If not, I'll definitely have some videos to post up later on the event. And it's pretty cool, but as my mom reminded me a couple days ago, it's a lot of work to get together, and I'm 2 days away from the event, and yes, I'm now putting stuff in bins. I made orders on Monday that I've already received, like extra bar tape, chains, made sure I had cables and housing and ferrules and all those little laundry list, checklist things. I do have a tool set that I specifically bought. I bought 3 of these guys for me and the crew to use from Feedback, which is a nice in the field one. We've been doing it for so many years. I figured we have a nice tool set to work with. We featured these last season and we fell in love with them. They pretty much took care of like 95% of the stuff we ran into out there. So it was pretty cool. But anyhow, that's what I need to dive into. Basically, I have a van full of stuff, tools, parts, and what have you, tubes, tires, anything we can try to fix in the field is like doing a mash out in the field. And whenever you do any of those events and you see those bike mechanics setups on the side, just think it takes about 3 or 4 days for these guys and gals just to get ready for the event. And then they're out there all day doing the event. So if you're doing that, give some good praise, tip them if you can. It's one of those things that they're out there trying to provide opportunity, especially if it's a charity ride, that kind of thing. They're trying to help out the cause and all that and get you going. The MS 150 this year, I think, has 1,500 riders going from North Denver to Fort Collins one day, and the second day returning the same way. We're in 2 different spots each day, or one spot in each, well, anyway, you know what I mean. So it's a 2-day grinder. Basically, our first day is a little bit later for us, which is fine, but the funny bit is the next day is a killer for us because the ride starts early. The people go, they open the track or everything at 6 a.m. and we have to be set up and ready at our first rest stop, which is up in Masonville, and that I think we're supposed to show up at 5 a.m. So anyway, just think of us when we're out there doing everything with a smile on our face. We're doing it for fun, and it's a great opportunity, and it's a great thing to do. I'm not talking bad about it at all. I'm just talking about there's all sorts of little twists and turns to it, and it's a very busy weekend for us. But if you're local here and you're doing the ride, hope to see you out there. Look us up. We're at Celebrity Church in Loveland the first day rest stop, and the second day on the way up through Masonville. We're in the Masonville, so if you're riding around Horsetooth and coming back down that side, we'll be there. We've done the Masonville stops several years in a row, so this is the first time doing it on the second day. It's usually on the first day. But anywho, leave you with all that tidbit. Thank you for spending time with me. I hope you have a great weekend, and until next time, from the garage.